Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first episode of the, Die of the Beholder podcast is what we're calling it now. I don't think we have like an official name calling it Die of the Beholder because that is also the name of our D&D stream on this channel. If you don't know what channel you're on, that's kind of odd, but it's Sir Carcass. I am Sir Carcass. My name is also Tristan. I'm here with Buddy Tom.
Hey everybody!
Who also plays in our D&D session as Gilman. What's Gilman?
Yeah,
What's Gilman's last name?
Gilman Hellwind.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm the kind of annoying, sneaky rogue in the party.
So we kind of sparked this because a couple of us in the session have been kind of taking turns DMing, and we had a couple conversations about doing this, and we thought maybe this could make a cool podcast. So we're gonna introduce ourselves a little bit, get to know us, and we're just gonna use this first episode to kind of chat, get to know each other. We already know each other, but the audience, the thousands of you out there listening right now, I'm sure.
The singles.
The tens of one audience.
Really lonely people of the world.
Yeah. I accidentally just switched over to the stream tab and it started talking back at me. But anyway, so I think kind of what we wanted to do first is just talk a little bit about our tabletop gaming background. I don't have a huge tabletop, gaming background. So, Tom, let's talk a little bit about how you got into tabletop gaming, what kind of tabletop gaming you've played, and how you ended up playing D&D first of all, and then we'll talk about our DMing stuff maybe a little bit later. But
sure.
However you want to go about that, take us away.
Yeah, I probably joined the ranks of the tabletop and role-playing nerds when probably 13, 14 years old, 8th grade, 7th grade-ish, hanging next to a couple of kids in class, and they had these catalogs containing all these little miniatures and stuff, goblins and dwarves and whatnot. And I said that looked cool, so they invited me to the local gaming store. And they were playing a game called Warhammer, which was a large-scale fantasy war battles, which I got into. Played that for many, many years. That was made by Games Workshop. So I played that and a lot of their other sub-games, Warhammer 40k, Mordheim, et cetera. I then sprawled into several other miniatures games and lots of board games as well. Descent was a very, very fun board game, kind of a dungeon crawl I played for a bit. Currently playing another dungeon crawl game called Gloomhaven. Nice. If anyone hasn't seen or heard of that, look into that. That's pretty fun. But role-playing probably started in high school. I didn't play a ton. High school, the kind of attention span of everybody was a little bit slower, a little bit lower. Couldn't quite grasp audiences as long. So usually campaigns would be 2, 3, 4 sessions at best. And then you would start all over again. I DM'd a couple of little things back then with a few people. Back then that would have been 3rd and 3.5. But I also DM'd a little Star Wars campaign that lasted about 4 or 5 sessions, which was pretty fun. That was also based on the D20 system. And that's kind of where I started. I played a little bit in my early 20s, and now much more heavily into role playing in my early 30s, which is awesome. Yeah.
Great. That takes us to our present day.
Yeah.
I was kind of in that same group, but I actually I would just kind of show up, watch you guys play, and just was always like, that's way too difficult for me.
Yeah.
You get out you start getting out the rulers and measuring how much space. And at the time I was just like, wow, I just can't even the rule books. I believe you and Shook and everyone, Nick had these just novels of rules that just seemed way beyond my comprehension. So I would just,
Yeah,
I kind of just watch you guys. So I really didn't get into real like tabletop, like gaming, like board gaming outside of, like Monopoly and stuff like that until probably the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years where I really started playing real board games. I actually started watching some YouTube videos on how to play a specific game. I don't remember what game I wanted to learn how to play. It might have been something like Catan or Catan, however you might pronounce that. And then I kind of was like, wow, that's I didn't realize games were that interesting. And then I started playing more and more board games, and which kind of also sparked my interest in D&D. And so then I started looking on YouTube for some like live play D&D stuff because I was kind of curious. I've always heard of D&D, and it was like the ultimate nerddom type of thing. Like,
Oh,
yeah. And
it is the holdout. It's like, yes, I go, like, even for me, when I first started playing Warhammer, yeah, I play Warhammer, but I don't sit at that weird table with those guys roll.
Yeah, I don't pretend that I'm a wizard out in the middle of the forest. And I even as a kid, I always just assumed D&D really had no rules, and it was just people sitting around a table just making stuff up, which to an extent kind of is what it is for some people. But I started watching a couple random YouTube things, and then I stumbled onto, which I'm sure a lot of people know, Critical Role. Back in 2015, late 2015, I got in, and they were playing, and they were it's a bunch of voice actors, for those of you who don't know. And I've always had this thing for voices. Like, I've always loved doing voices, and I've always had this kind of creative writing thing going on in my mind. And I realized how much of not just a nerdy thing, which is, a good thing, that D&D was. It was also a creative thing, and that it gave me like, my mind just started turning like, wow, I can really just tell stories and just like do whatever I want. It gave me an outlet to start, for my creative stuff that I just kind of kept bottled up because I had nowhere else to put it. So that's really why I started playing D&D. So I've been playing since 2016. So it's only been 2 years, actually maybe 2015. I don't remember exactly, but I started playing with a coworker of mine. Was like, hey, we're going to be playing this game, and I was like, you have an open seat? Maybe I'll jump in and see what it's like. And I've been hooked ever since. It doesn't seem like it's been that long. But at the same time, it seems like I've been doing this forever. I just feel super at home with it now. And that's pretty much, that's my leading up till now kind of nutshell.
Yeah, it's a great creative outlet. It's like building a create your own adventure, and even once you've written part of your campaign or part of your session, sometimes the characters in it, the PCs, decide to do something else. Mm-hmm. So you do have to kind of like spitball and come up with something else for them to do at the same time, which is great. So it does always create the creative juices going. You're probably like me, where you're sitting there at work, and half the time you're not thinking about work. You're thinking about what are you going to do for the next session? What are you going to put your PCs through?
Right. Yeah.
Or when you are a PC in a campaign, what are we going to get into? Or even kind of looking at things in retrospect, like what should I have done, or what could I have done differently?
Right. Yeah, it's a good portion of my mental capacity at this point. It comes up in conversation daily, just, between someone I talk to at work, or, talking to my wife about it, who is very patient with me, listening to all of my really nerdy talk about fighting dragons and crawling through dungeons.
My next question for you was going to be, because we are both married. What's going to be, do you ever just start rambling to your wife about this stuff? And
Absolutely.
does she get annoyed? Tell you to shut the hell up?
No.
Or do you just, she just like nod and smile and agree and keep going?
Yeah, no, she lets me talk about it. She actually is very patient with it. I mean, it's not like it's annoying or anything. It's kind of like, you get home from work and you talk about your day. It's kind of that kind of conversation where it's like, oh, we did this last night in our campaign, or the players did this, and because she knows all of you guys, it's kind of like just a normal conversation of me telling a story as if we were actually doing this stuff. So, but it's also nice too to have someone that I can kind of talk to and like bounce some ideas off of, and she's like, oh, that sounds interesting. I haven't talked her into playing yet. I think I'm close, but we'll see how it goes. I'm actually trying to write a solo campaign to see if I can get her interest piqued. If not, just to play once, just to get an idea, just so she knows what this is about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Trying to get your spouse into it, I feel like a big thing, especially if you can just break that ice and get them into it once.
Yeah.
Usually people are fucked. It's definitely like a community or a social thing. It's not just playing a nerdy game. It is having fun with others. It's a good time.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
Yeah. I started writing that kind of solo campaign, or at least a one-shot kind of short adventure, and trying to really strip it down to like what it is, like what the game is at its core, and just finding a way that we can play through it in maybe 2 hours, experience as much of it as you can, and then just kind of let her decide whether or not she thought it was fun. And no pressure. Yeah. You don't have to play it anymore, but it's kind of like she's into knitting and crocheting, and I agreed that if she played, then I would learn how to either crochet or knit or whatever's easier.
Brilliant. Yeah, crocheting is probably a little easier.
Probably. There's only one of those little metal things involved, not two.
Yep.
So
in your, without giving too much away for your solo campaign, is it going to be like a little dungeon crawl? Is it going to be a full adventure? Will she be running around with other like NPCs or?
Yeah. So I can say, since she's listening, to make sure the audio sounds good, I don't want to give too much away, but it's basically a bit of each. She gets an adventure. She has a task to go on to. She's going to be a 3rd level ranger. So kind of within that adventure is also kind of like a companion. She gets her beast companion out of it. And it's kind of like a little bit of investigating, a little action, and then right at the very end, maybe a little bit of cliffhanger. So just in case she does want to play again, there's a story that can kind of grow from there. So it's shaping out to be pretty interesting, I think. Kind of like the starter edition, the Lost Mines of Phandelver, where you have that first encounter with the goblins and you go into the goblin cave and you really get to like, oh, okay, like this is D&D.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like that.
Cool. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah. So what about you? You going to do that hot yoga?
Here's the thing. If you can get your wife into it and she agrees to play again, I'm sure I can convince my wife to do it.
We're all conspiring.
Really gonna try and avoid the hot yoga though. Really don't want to. I don't want to be in a room that's 100 degrees, just sweating buckets in front of people.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll start with regular yoga.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I know what she probably wouldn't want to play. So I removed some of that stuff from the game, which would probably be some of the stuff that as you first start playing, you're not that comfortable with, like dialogue, trying to get in character and talk as a character versus just kind of talking as the player. So I removed a lot of NPC dialogue. Because that's to me at least was some of the harder stuff to do as a new player. Just getting into a role where you can just talk as your character.
Yeah. Yeah, and I still struggle depending on my character. I still sort of like even Gilman. I've been playing him for over a year now,
Mm-hmm.
and I still don't know what his voice should be like or want to be like.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good with like a barbarian or a squirrely wizard or a little gnome, but like he's just a human. He's a human rogue, and
Right.
to do a human rogue, I don't know what I should talk. I don't know if I should try and be like the smart wisecracking jokester like a Daredevil, or should I just be kind of like the silent type and kind of stalking in the background most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny that even a year into this campaign, I still don't know how my character should be acting.
Yeah.
That's bad. Yep.
Yeah, I mean it's I did the same thing for the first year of our campaign. I was a ranger, and I kind of wanted to play like just your typical kind of ranger, the brooding type, the Wolverine character. And it took me probably the first year to kind of say, okay, well, maybe I don't want to play that character. I kind of picked that because I didn't want to have to act or talk too much. I wanted an excuse to be quiet if I didn't really feel like talking. But then as I got a little more comfortable with it, I kind of narratively went through a couple things during the campaign that kind of allowed my character to start to open up and act out a little bit more. And towards the end of that campaign that I was in, is when I felt like I really started to understand my character. I mean, it sounds so weird when you talk about it, but for anyone who hasn't played, but yeah, that character it's trying to nail down something that you're not that person, so it's like trying to figure out how they would act in a certain situation. To me, which is also a ton of fun because it feels like you're acting in a role. But yeah, it's tough getting to know your character because they don't exist.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. They are not real peoples.
So that was a good tangent. Something completely off of our talking points. So to kind of bring it back in. I think I did want to preface the podcast with a little bit of a disclaimer that you've probably picked up on, is that we are both fairly new, at least fairly recently new to dungeon mastering. So we don't want to come across as a instructional how to DM podcast where it's more like 2 or 3 fresh DMs learning how to do it as we go and sharing what we've learned from our mistakes, kind of thing. Ben, who is going to be our third person who comes in off and on, and we'll also have some other guests, probably starting out with people that are in our campaign because that's who we have right now. But yeah, this is not a how-to. This is just more of a conversational type of podcast where you can learn from our mistakes. And if you've never DM'd before, then maybe this will be helpful. And if you are a professional DM, maybe this can turn into a conversation in that direction too, where you can give us some pointers. But that's the focus of this type of adventure, I guess. It's an adventure, really. We don't know where it's going to go. So we're
No idea.
just trying it out, see what happens.
Yeah, a couple of new DMs, few new DMs on the prowl. Yeah, any suggestions from people is always great, helpful. Um, and yeah, anything that you can take from us is great too. That's yeah. Um, yeah. When did you? Is our campaign that I play in? Is this the first campaign you've DM'd?
It is, yeah, yeah. We started with a little over a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while. So we only we play bi-weekly, and there's a lot of times we skip a week. So a year is not 52 weeks of, we're only on session maybe 20 something, close to 30 maybe, and we've streamed probably about 10 of them by now, 9 or 10. So we've streamed about a third of it, but I started with this campaign, starting with the starter edition, because I just figured, well, that seems like the best place to start. And now we're kind of rolling with some character background stuff that kind of we laid the foundation to during the starting campaign. And that's where we're at now. We're our last session was we're diving deep into a goblin cave at level 6, which is kind of odd, but it took us that long to get there. So I'm trying to make it as interesting and as difficult as I can. You guys have killed, I think, like 30 goblins so far in 2 sessions, so that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, mostly thanks to Samo, who just like cleaves 3 a turn, just womp womp womp.
Right, our Tortle Barbarian Storm Herald, who rolled 2 or 3 natural 20s in a row and just probably knocked out a good 10 goblins on his own.
Yeah.
So how about you? I know you've been running yourself through some stuff. Talk a little bit about how that's going. Where you came up with that idea?
So I mean, okay. So I probably DM'd a couple of like, single sessions and, maybe a few 3-session campaigns when I was younger for some buddies. Again, nothing real crazy or major, and it was all either in 3 and 3.5 or in the Star Wars. And then I hadn't DM'd for a really long time. And then I just started back up earlier this year. A bunch of guys from work, they played a lot of board games, and maybe one was super into the idea of playing Dungeons and Dragons. One was kind of down for whatever, and 2 or 3 was like, nah, I don't want to do D&D. Like, that's just too much. I don't want. And you're trying to explain to these people like it's not that complicated. It's actually a pretty simple game.
Right.
Most of it is just kind of sometimes thinking what you would actually maybe do in this situation and just have fun and just enjoy it. Have fun.
Yeah.
So I came up with actually a really simple D6 game system that was more of like a dungeon crawl that we played probably 10, 12 sessions of.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. And all the guys really liked that. But I wanted more. And then we got into like the whole Thanksgiving, Christmas area where we missed about 6 weeks. And I wasn't feeling going back to that game. I wanted more, and a couple of the other guys wanted more. So we decided to just roll up some 5e characters.
Nice.
One of the players, I originally had 5 PCs. One of them dropped out because he didn't want to do D&D. He was being too cool, if you will. So I taught him how to roll up characters, which was pretty fun. I did that individually with everyone, and I got to kind of have them create their own backstory and stuff. And then in addition to that, I ended up creating my own realm. Dormaran is the name of the realm. Nice. So far, I have one map, one continent with a bunch of islands on it. And what's pretty neat about that is as they kind of go, their characters were able to kind of forge the backstory of some of these areas or regions of the continent.
Gotcha.
And so far it's pretty good experience. The guys are really enjoying it. I'm sure I'm messing up a ton. They don't know any better. Ha ha
Yeah,
ha. Yeah, they got no clue.
that's the
But
joy.
they, yeah, every day I come, the next day I come to work and they're like, dude, that was awesome. That was so much fun. When this happened, it was great. And usually my wife, because we play in my basement, usually my get upstairs, my wife's like, you guys were really loud. And usually the more loud we are, the better the session or the more exciting it was.
Right.
Um, so a lot of battles have come down to just like, luck. Sometimes I take the battles and I make them a little too tough, too much of a challenge rating, and it comes down to like that last die roll, and the one time dude just gets a critical hit and just lops off this dude's head, and just
Yeah.
everyone starts screaming, me included, and we're all noodly armed and yelling, and it's a good.
That's it.
Yep.
That's interesting. I have the exact opposite problem, and I don't know if maybe it's because we have 5 level 6 players right now, and I think the highest character I played was a level 8. So not being used to like kind of the way the CR system is just kind of a mess anyway. I use a couple tools to help me, and I kind of base it off of more like narrative battles, like what makes sense as opposed to what's the right CR creature.
Right. Yes.
But it seems like you guys pretty much roll through everything I throw at you. So that's one thing that I always seem to struggle with is finding the right difficulty. And I think maybe my problem is I'm afraid to be too difficult, which at this point we've played for long enough that maybe I just need to let go of that. And if one of you guys die, there's always resurrections and stuff like that.
Yeah, or you know what? Roll up a new character.
That's true. Yeah, maybe someone's tired of their character anyway. They can sacrifice themselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's part of the game too.
Yeah.
If it accidentally dies, honestly, we oh geez, we do create an attachment to our character, but you're gonna move on. You're gonna start a new one, and you're gonna learn from that experience.
So I think our third DM is getting ready to join us here. So I'm gonna do a quick scene switch. Ben, are you in here now?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
No,
It helps if I actually turn off muting.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's better to talk when you're unmuted.
Yeah. Usually I'm used to the push to talk stuff, and I changed that up, and or no, I did the opposite. I have push to talk on, and I forgot I had it on.
Oh, gotcha.
So what's going on, fellas?
So we were just talking about kind of a little bit of background on ourselves and how we got into tabletop gaming first of all, and then how we got into D&D, which then led to dungeon mastering. So if you want to jump in with anything, tell us a little bit about maybe what set you on your tabletop gaming journey and how you ended up where you are now running sessions for us.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. So, like you guys, well, I actually feel like I have less experience than even you guys do. I only got into the D&D stuff just as a spectator, like maybe a couple years ago. Got started just listening to the Adventure Zone, and then Critical Role from there.
Good place.
And then
good place to start.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really good content. It's a good way to kind of get interested into it. They both tell really good stories and introduce you into the whole system. So
yeah,
I think what they're doing is like, I think it's pretty obvious at this point, but it's easy to say it again that it's done a lot for just the outreach for D&D in general.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that got me interested in it, and then just seeing the opportunity to play with you guys has helped quite a bit. And then it was actually I had to look this up earlier when I pulled up your notes. There there was an article on D&D Beyond back in May, I think it was, just giving general advice about running like DMing a campaign,
Mhm.
DMing for the first time. And one of the suggestions on there was to run one of the first Adventure League modules, which was the Flan series. And I kind of like that approach because it didn't need as much prep ahead of time.
Yeah.
I mean, it still felt like I did a lot of prep compared to how much time we spent playing. But at least like all the NPCs were laid out, the story was laid out, the missions were kind of laid out. So it's like, oh, all right, this stuff is taken care of. Then now I can just focus on what is it like to actually be the person driving the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
And I kind of like that approach. It's helped me get a little bit more comfortable DMing, but still having the content in front of me that I can go off of and use a story that's already written, and so I don't have to worry about that part of it.
Yeah, and that's
At least not at this point.
That's kind of how I was saying I started with the starter edition, the Lost Mines of Phandelver, which is, I believe, actually where the Adventure Zone started. A very loosely based. They really ran with their own thing on that. But that was actually the first D&D game that I played was the Lost Mines of Phandelver. So I figured, okay, I've played this. I know it pretty well from a player standpoint, so running it as a DM should be a breeze. And it was. I mean, really, I almost didn't even follow the book because I kind of just went with my memory of it and then added stuff here and there. But yeah, I mean, starter edition, a one shot, a low level campaign of some sort is perfect to get through, and especially with Twitch and YouTube and podcasts of live play stuff, you can pre-watch what you're going to run if it's a published content, and it gives you a good kind of like starting point of like what to expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I even did that same thing with the Flan series because there are other people out there that play that series, and before I ran some of you guys through the missions, I would watch how other groups did that and kind of try to anticipate what to expect, just how things are going to go. Actually, the thing I paid attention to the most was how do the other DMs portray or do different things in the adventure. So like introducing a few NPCs, I wasn't entirely sure what, like, even as simple as like this person walks into an inn and is looking for you, which sounds pretty straightforward, but like actually doing that as a DM for the first time, I had to listen to like maybe 3 or 4 different people do that before I really cued on like what are the steps I go through, like what do I say? Like, what do I do that makes this NPC memorable, but not just like completely ridiculous? So,
right, yeah,
it helps to have other reference points. It helps a lot.
Yeah, and
when you guys introduce like an NPC like that, do you give like a little description about him? You know, like guy walks into an inn, you know, the door creaks open, and one of you guys turn to notice that a guy in, you know, let's say a hat and long greasy hair with a scar. Like, do you give like description like that, or are you just like, oh, dude walks in? What do you guys do? I know what you do, Tristan, because I've played with you several times. But Ben, I haven't really. I just played that one brief dungeon with Ben.
Yeah, right. Where you just hopped in at the end. Yeah, I try to be pretty descriptive. Like if it's something that they're observing, like if it's obvious. So like you are sitting at a chair at a table and the door opens and a person walks in, like I try to imagine like you as a character, you're going to take in the fact that this guy has this big hat on, or he's got like a lot of ruffle, he looks like he's been traveling a lot or something like that. A lot of that stuff I'll just throw out there up front. I mean, part of it is to kind of convey what you would see, like if you were the character sitting where you're sitting, and then the other half of it is there's a little bit of brevity that I want to get through. We could do the back and forth of like, do do I think that this person looks like he was traveling through this forest or something like that?
Right.
Yeah.
Some of that gets a little tedious, and I don't think adds a lot to the adventure.
Yeah.
So those are the two things I kind of weigh whenever I introduce an NPC. It's just what would you see as a character, and what do I feel is actually necessary? Like what actually adds to the session.
Yeah, how much information do you need for descriptive quality, or versus how much is just overkill on going into this character?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I kind of struggle with that. And I think this is kind of like probably the beginning of a different conversation, but briefly the benefit and the the pro and con of using Roll20 the way we do is I tend to forget about descriptions because I have everything in front of me. Like you can see the player token. I've scoured the internet and found a image of a person that I am picturing to be this NPC, and I leave off the description sometimes because it's just there. So that's kind of something that I always try to remind myself to add a little bit of just flavor and nothing that's just not obvious, but stuff like scenery where you just those adding a couple descriptive words or sentences really draws you in, even though you can already see the map and already see the scenery in Roll20. I find that, at least for me, I enjoy it a lot more when I actually do give you guys a little bit extra description. Makes it feel a little more alive.
Yeah, I think it adds a sense of narrative to it, almost like it's a kind of an art almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're opening the world to people. It's obvious. It's like reading a book. Obviously, everyone is going to create this own world in their own mind, but this is your interpretation of it,
right?
Where they should be, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I always leave off bits, and I probably leave off maybe too much. But I almost want to leave off enough to intrigue player. You guys are my players, but intrigue you to want to investigate it more, because I feel like if I describe too much, it's going to make it obviously that this character is someone you should be interacting with, where I want to make it feel a little bit more like you are seeking out information as opposed to information kind of just flowing into you. And that's kind of like comes with higher level gameplay anyway, because you're not just going to an inn and getting your first quest, which is kind of where a lot of that, the person walks into the tavern or walks into the inn, he's wearing this, and this, comes to you guys and says, you guys look like a bunch of adventurers that can get some gold.
Yeah, you guys look like you can handle a job for me.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so like,
you guys want to do a cave?
Right. Yeah, so it's a hard balance deciding whether I want to make a character obvious to you guys or whether I want you to go out and seek something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to balance that because especially for beginners, both like beginning DMing and beginner players, I think one of the key things to hit on is to have crystal clear objectives.
Right.
I think when the players aren't entirely sure what to do, then that's when you get a little bit of frustration, and I think you start to lose a little bit of the fun, I guess, out of the game. Like I think you can do that in a good way, but I don't think I'm very experienced. I'm not experienced enough to do that correctly. So I think like even though it's really not like very it doesn't sound like a good story to say, hey, you're sitting at it in, this guy comes in, he's obviously in distress and needs help and he's looking for adventures, and you fit the bill.
Yeah.
It's still like it's a weird balance you got to strike between it shouldn't be super obvious, but it also should be interesting enough where the players want to help this person out.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like the way I picture some NPCs is in a video game where you walk into a new area and the NPCs that have quests for you all have exclamation points, and kind of describing an NPC is basically putting an exclamation point over their head. And I kind of want to, I feel like I kind of want to stay away from that and have, describe the setting. Maybe, if we're in, you keep using the analogy of an inn, you're all in an inn and there's people everywhere. So maybe, to start the kind of investigative gameplay of like, okay, well, does anyone look maybe out of the ordinary, or does anyone look like they're in trouble, or is anyone constantly watching the door, or kind of start to ask some questions about people in there. And then at times too, there may not be anything in there for you guys, but you come up with a question that I'm like, you know what, actually I didn't think of that, so yes, there is someone in there, and kind of just improv a side quest of some sort. So there's a lot of benefit to coming in as a new player and as a new DM to get all those descriptions and those introductions kind of as crystal clear, like you said at the beginning. But once the players kind of get that idea of like you giving them a descriptive character every time, when you don't, then it kind of feels like there's an empty room there, even though there is a room full of people. So it's like, when do you kind of taper off is also a difficult thing to gauge, how much information to withhold versus to feed.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard, and I think it does largely depend on your players.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've got to be pretty generous with newer players and be pretty obvious with some of this. And then as the players get a little bit more comfortable with their characters, I think it gets a little bit easier to maybe just ease back on how straightforward you're being about a certain objective or whatnot. And it's not even just how comfortable the players are, but also you being able to anticipate what your players are going to do. I don't think you can always completely like plan for what your players are going to do. But
no, you can't. You really can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I heard this in one of the DM tips from Matt Mercer. It's like if you play with people for long enough, you kind of get just the rough feelings for how they handle certain situations, and you can kind of use that to guide what you think will happen. But yeah, it's really, you still got to be careful that you still will probably be surprised by what they'll end up doing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we've been playing over a year, and I still have no idea what you guys are going to end up doing with what I give you. One of my favorite instances was with Nick's character Harkin with that mace, the cursed mace. That whole scenario when I think you guys had sat down for a long rest, and I gave him kind of a dream sequence where he was like standing over a bunch of corpses, and then he wakes up and he's standing over you guys, and he just started screaming and like woke everyone up, and I was like, well, okay, I was not expecting that.
All right.
I just figured he would kind of keep it to himself and then stew in it for a little while, but yeah, you guys dealt with it immediately. And the alternative to that was going to be as soon as he tried to get rid of the weapon, he was going to be kind of pulled into the gem with the wraith that was inside of it, that was thirsting for these souls, and he was going to have to battle him 1-to-1. So when you guys shattered the weapon and the wraith, came out, it was a pretty easy battle, but it was still interesting. But it happened completely differently than I would have even imagined. I don't know how I didn't anticipate that, but it just was not even in my mind that that's how it was going to go down.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, honestly, as a player, I didn't get the feeling that was all like improvised. Like I felt like there was at least some element of that, or actually quite a bit of that I thought was planned, I guess.
Yeah.
And
that's,
but yeah, I mean,
that's kind of the
Yeah,
beauty.
that's the big thing, I guess.
The beauty of the DMs behind the DM screen is like, some most of the times for me, you guys come up with stuff better than what I have. So I'm like, okay, let's roll with that instead. And I'd kind of just fit my pieces into what you guys have kind of decided. And you have no idea. You have no idea when that happens or when you fall into my kind of trap, or vice versa.
And about Nick, I've never DM'd for Nick, but I've known Nick long enough to know Nick's a wild.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can actually plan for what Nick is gonna do.
Right.
That's got to make things pretty interesting for the next few sessions, I imagine, for you, Tristan. Trying to figure out what Nick's going to do, I imagine, as his arc starts to come to a pretty big head here.
Right. Yeah. He's they're currently hunting down the Goblin clan responsible for his wife and child's murder. So yeah, he's switched off. His character has just switched off all caution and is just. I like the description that he gave, where he's kind of approaching it like Jason, hunting one of his teenagers that he wants to kill. He's basically just slow, steady, methodical, just walking straight through the cave, killing every goblin he sees until he's killed the last one, and then he's kind of. It's going to be interesting to see what how that affects his character. Where he takes that from there. We had a little bit of conversation about that, and I'm excited to see what happens of it.
Yeah, me too. I can only imagine DMing that, having to anticipate or have Nick kind of in that almost driver's seat, planning for at least some outcome. That sounds pretty tricky to me.
Yeah, like if I throw, a bunch of stuff in one room that I am going to assume you guys are going to stealth into, that's most likely not going to be the case. So
right.
The good thing about having a week between or 2 weeks between sessions is I have a lot of time to rework a little bit of stuff, but the difficulty is with that ranger sense of I forget the exact phrase for it, but the
primeval
awareness, where he can sense his favorite enemies up to 5 miles away. So whatever number of goblins I give him at the beginning has to stay the same, otherwise there's a loop, or there's a hole there. But maybe, who knows, maybe there's another entrance somewhere that you guys don't know about, and somehow they've called for backup. But
these goblins are multiplying.
Yeah, they're rabbits.
Just doing it all the time.
So kind of, we've got probably about 10 minutes left. I think the next session, we're probably going to focus a little more on kind of like our first DMing sessions, and like kind of a little tips, some of the things that we've learned from the mistakes we made in our first couple sessions or first campaign. But to kind of round off this conversation, I don't know if we've probably talked about it a little bit, but what kind of drove you guys to make that leap from player to DM? I know what mine was, but I'll let you guys tackle that first.
Mine was for me, some of the groups of guys I was hanging out with, I was either the more experienced or the more determined to kind of go through the rules and read the rules and look into how being a DM or a GM kind of works and what you should do, and kind of the whole process. So it kind of was like a little bit, when I was younger, kind of like forced upon me. I wouldn't say forced upon me, but they wanted to do it and I wanted to do it. And I said, why not? I don't care. And then this last time, again, the group of guys at work, they wanted to play board games, and they used to play board games together, and that kind of got stale. So they wanted to do something else. So I said, let's just do this. And they were kind of on board for it. And I told them I'd just take the reins and do it and DM for them. And so far, yeah, it's working out great.
Gotcha. Yeah, being the veteran, kind of being the one to take initiative and say, I'm a player in another game, so sure, I'll DM for you guys.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at, because of my miniature, I would say my miniatures gaming experience. I'm pretty decent at reading a rule book and understanding rules and retaining the things I've read.
Right.
I am kind of lazy. Every role playing book has a section. Half of the book is spell list. I haven't read that, so I usually
Right.
don't know what half the spells do. So I need to go back and reread those. But yeah, as far as core mechanics and statistics go, I'm pretty good at remembering that stuff.
Gotcha.
And I'd say I'm fairly creative on the spot. I can be kind of lazy of prep work, but yeah, on the spot, I'm fairly creative.
Sure.
And again, I get kind of animated and noodly armed, and but I'm DMing, so like they get a kick out of it too.
Yeah, you're kind of the big tall wind thing outside of the car dealership.
Yeah, I'm just flailing around all the time, and also it's probably kind of enjoyable with these guys. At work, I am. It's just a retail job, but I am their boss, and they're
Right.
a little bit younger than me. So I think they also get a kick out of, sometimes I have to be the hard ass at work, and then when they're in my own house, I'm just this complete goofball.
Right.
Talking about gabbling, sticking things with forks and stuff,
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Nice. For me, it was sort of similar to what you were saying, Tom. Like once I started getting interested in D&D, I got interested in like a lot of the rules, and it was more than just like how does one class work. I got like really interested in like, well, how do all the classes work? Like I got really interested in learning about all the different ones. I didn't want to play just one character. I just wanted to learn about a bunch of them. And that turned into, well, I mean, DMs play a whole bunch of different characters in a sort of maybe a little bit more of a lightweight way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think between that and I don't know, something about it just seemed really fun to me. Like maybe being able to orchestrate something where it's like a whole bunch of people just end up having fun. Like that just general high level idea just really appeals to me. And I mean, I didn't have much planned ahead of time. I just was like, I found those Flan adventures from the D&D Beyond, and I was like, well, what the hell? Like, what would it take? Like, how much prep would it take for me to set up one of these sessions? And I honestly just started doing the Roll20 prep before I even really pitched the idea out to you guys. And then I think at some point we had like an off week or something like that, or a holiday or something. And I was just like, well, do you guys just want to do this instead? And luckily I got Tristan and one other guy, and that actually worked out well because oh no, it was Steve Brown too. But still, it was a relatively small group for the very first session, and it worked out pretty well. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's something about just being able to orchestrate the whole thing, and I feel like almost at a sense of obsessive compulsive disorder, like looking at the D&D rules, where like I just feel like I keep consuming these things, and this is like a good use of all that, I guess.
Yeah. For me, it was playing. I played I think for about a year, and I was like so into it, and I really wanted you guys. I was like, I think I brought it up in our group chat, and I just said, hey, I've been playing D&D and been thinking about maybe running it. Would you guys want to join in? And I was actually surprised. There was, almost everyone decided, yeah, I want to play. And I ran the starter edition because I figured that was, like I said, a good entry point, something easy to do, so I didn't have to do a lot of DM prep as I got used to running it. But then it became really about, I really wanted to tell some stories, and you guys gave me some really good backstories, because that's kind of what I wanted this campaign to focus on, is your character backstories, and I love, like movies and stuff that are really character driven, and I really wanted to weave together some intense kind of character stories, and it's taken a lot longer to get through certain things, but that's okay. I'm happy with it. But just the idea of storytelling was like the biggest push for me. And again, my entire life as a kid, I've always been like the voice actor type, where I just love doing voices. Like I would just, drive my wife crazy doing random voices. And now I have a reason to do it because I'm practicing. I don't just have to do it in my car when I'm driving by myself anymore, and people driving by.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
Do you feel weird on your way to work when you're doing voices?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you're talking to yourself?
Yeah, sometimes I will kind of pretend that I'm using like Bluetooth or something, like talking to someone on the phone, so I can run through a couple pieces of dialogue in a couple different voices, and try to get that voice down. Yeah.
I usually just get to work and say to myself, Jesus, I need to go talk to someone. I need some help.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was all about just like finding an outlet for the creative side of me that has been kind of just been festering, really. This was just like the perfect place for me to put those things.
I do a lot of Deckard Cain in my campaign, I guess.
Right. It's kind of the
That's
default.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime there's an
That's a good
old
one.
wizard, you do Deckard Cain.
Have a Roderick cube.
Quite the treasure there in that Herodric cube.
Stay a while and listen.
Help!
Well, we are on the dot. I think it's 10:01 our time, and I think we made it our first hour of our first episode. I think we touched on a lot of good stuff that we can expand on later. We're gonna try. I think we're gonna try to do this weekly. If I can get at least one of you, we'll figure that out on the other end. But this was a lot of fun. I think we could really talk a lot. Well, there's a lot to talk about for sure. And I think maybe this could be useful if we can get it out there. So thank you guys for entertaining my idea of a podcast.
Yeah, thanks for setting it up. It's always fun to just pop on and talk D&D, so it's very little effort for me.
Yeah, it gives us an excuse to do it more frequently. It's like you can't just sit around and talk about D&D when you're not just hanging out together in the same house, drinking. So it gives us an opportunity to do that. And if nothing else, I think we can at least learn from each other, which in the end is going to benefit at least the three of us and our players. So I think that's it. You guys have anything else you want to say?
No, thank you again. Yeah, thank you for setting it up. Had a good time. Looking forward to the official episode 1.
Yeah. This is kind of our introductory episode, so I think I wasn't sure how it was going to go or what we were going to talk about. We definitely proved that we can fill an hour of conversation. So I think there's a lot less pressure now. Right.
Yep.
Awesome. Next time we are going to see if maybe we could get one of our players to join us. I know Steve was interested. So we'll try to set that up. We'll be back here Wednesday next week, hopefully, 9 p.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, I'm going to see if I can get this uploaded to a couple places. We'll see how that goes. But until then, thank you all for hanging out, and we will talk to you soon.